Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam, Trailokyam Sacharacharam, Tatpadam Darshitam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Twameva Mata cha Pita, Twameva Bandhuscha Sakha, Twameva Vidya Dravinam, Twameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva, Twameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So we're in the section called the negation of the Panchakosha, the five sheaths. And what Shankara here is dealing with the 7 questions that the student had asked earlier. Remember what they are is, what is our bondage? How has it come about? How does it continue to exist? How do we get out of it completely? What is the not self? Who is the real self? And what is the process of discrimination between the two? So Shankara has taken up the subject. I am now going to explain the discrimination between the self and the not self most elaborately. And the idea here is, if we can clearly see what we are not, it becomes much clearer to see what we are. So let me give you the shorthand version of what Shankara is driving at. If it has a beginning and an end, if it occurs in time and space, if it has qualities, characteristics, if it is subject to change, if it's confined to the waking dream or deep sleep state, and most importantly, if it can be known as an object, it is anatman, not self. Who is the self? The self is the awareness, the consciousness that illumines that. So we started off elaborately discussing the Annamaya Kosha, the food sheath, which is this lump of meat. It consumes a mountain of food and it produces a mountain of poop, and eventually is food for worms. It has a beginning and an end. It's comprised of bones and flesh and blood and guts, filled with feces and urine. Whoever's got that scratchy sound, would you please mute? So I am not the body because I'm the knower of the body. I am the witness of its changes. It is anatman. It's like a pot that I observe. It's not self. And then we went into the discussion of the pranamaya kosha, the vital air sheath, the energy that vitalizes the various functions. A lot of people get all caught up in energy, energy work, energy healing. It's very beautiful, very good. But that's not it. Why? Because I know the energy and it rises and it falls. It's an objective cognition. I am not the prana. I'm not the vital energy. And then just before we went on our break, we started on the manomaya kosha, the mental sheath. Shankara has talked about it as the mental sheath where judgment, feeling happens, our determination of the value of things. And he set forward this radical idea for Westerners that in fact, the world that we see is nothing but the mind. We have no way of verifying that there is an objective world out there. And certainly my opinion of it is in my mind. It's the mind that creates the world. Stop the mind and you stop the world. That's about where we left off. And what was the verse we're starting on? Was it 169, I think you were saying?
Yes.
Yes.
And would you help us out, please, Ganesh?
Nahyastya vidya manaso atirikta mano hyavidya bhavabhanda hetuhu tasmin vinashte sakalam vinashtam vijrambhatismin sakalam vijrambhate. Apart from the mind, there is no ignorance, avidya. The mind itself is the ignorance, which is the cause for the bondage of rebirth. When the mind is destroyed, everything else is destroyed. When the mind manifests, everything else manifests.
So this sounds very harsh. The mind is to be destroyed. Are we supposed to get a frontal lobotomy or something like that? No. So we have to understand the subtle import of the verse. Mind is this. I think I'm a person. I think there's a world of name and form separate from me, with joy-giving and misery-producing qualities. And I need to struggle either to acquire the people, places, things, and conditions that I want, or to fix me, or to get away from all the crap I don't like. That is the mind. That is my world. That is my personal zoo. And the cause of it is spiritual ignorance. When that is destroyed, the world is destroyed. Meaning, even though my senses report a world of name and form, I'm not fooled by it. Let me see if I can give you an example of how this works. So if you close your eyes and you visualize a strawberry, you can make it very vivid. Mine's nice and ripe and it has a nice fragrance to it. And, oh, it would be just really nice to have strawberries with heavy cream and lots of sugar. Now, I can see that strawberry of my imagination, but I know that it's just a mental picture. But if I dream I'm sitting down at the dining room table with a bowl of strawberries and cream in front of me, to the dreamer, the strawberry seems real. In fact, though, both are imagination. What's the difference? In the dream, I am ignorant of the fact that it's imagination. And then I subsequently think it's real. So also, all of this is just the play of consciousness. All is Maya, all is bliss. But in my ignorance, I think I'm a person. I think there's stuff out there. And when I think I'm a person, there's always a neediness. And I want. Or I want to get rid of, I want to fix, I want to get away from. When that ignorance is removed, when I know as a direct experience that I'm the ground of being, that witnessing consciousness, but all this, like a light show, it's like a hologram. And I no longer have the suffering that ignorance produces. Any thoughts about this? All right, next verse.
स्वप्नेऽर्थ शून्ये सृजति स्वशक्त्या भोक्त्रादिविश्वं मन एव सर्वं तथैव जाग्रत् अपिनो विशेषः तत्सर्वम् एतन्मनसो विजृम्भणम्. In the dream state, even though there is no contact, with the outside world, the mind alone projects the entire dream universe of enjoyer and so on. Similarly, the waking state is no different. All this, that is the world of pluralistic phenomena, is but a projection of the mind.
Yes. So we have to understand that Shankara is not teaching what we call solipsism. Solipsism is where you deny the reality of the phenomenal world, but maintain the reality of your individual ego. A lot of the New Age metaphysics devolve into that. There are no situations in my life, I'm just projecting it all. And, why am I screaming at myself through my boss? It's just my own mind that's projecting that. And the problem is, you think your ego becomes the center of the universe. And what Vedanta is saying is this phenomenal world is a projection, but who's doing the projecting? It's the total mind. It's a group effort. Now, in a sense, there's no way to verify that what I'm seeing is the same as what you're seeing. I look at the glass over here and I say, there is a red glass filled with water. You may see, yeah, there's a red glass. But how do I know what you're seeing as red is the same as what I'm seeing as red? We're just kind of agreeing on what we're going to call it. So I look at it it's as if the whole phenomenal world's a hologram, and all of the sentient beings in it are projecting it to some degree. We each have our viewpoint, we each have our opinions, we each have our ideas. And that's our individual reality, but we also share in it. And there can be dissonances. I mean, I find this whole thing about the presidential election fascinating because it's such a clear example. Whole bunch of people think that there was fraud in the election, that Trump won. A whole nother group of people think that no, it was a free and fair election. And how powerful those subjective opinions are. They create the world for those people. Now, what the yogi wants to do is understand that he cannot or she cannot see the world without some form of judgment along with it. There are some schools of Buddhism that teach that you can get rid of your judgments and you can see the phenomenal world as it is. A rose is a rose. A chair is a chair. Vedanta would say, actually, we've got to take it back one step further. The fact that you can see it's a rose and the fact that you can see it's a chair is still a subtle form of conditioning. When you get rid of the mind, you can't see the world. So the great image that Ramana Maharshi used, and with young people with all this digital stuff, we're going to have to come up with a new one. But in the old-timey days of a movie projector, he would say the self is like the light in the movie projector. The mind is like the film. The images on the film are my various ideas, opinions, judgments, etc. And what shows up on the screen is what I think is the external objective world. All right, I'm going to see the world as it is and get rid of all my ideas about it. So what happens if you scrub all the images off the film? What do you see? Nothing. So what the yogi wants to do is not believe her mind. Yogi learns not to take himself seriously. Because it's all just mind. It's all just imagination. The foolish person does not take life seriously. The intelligent person takes life seriously. But the wise person seriously doesn't take life seriously. Because she knows it's all the projection of mind. It's like an image in a mirror. It's like a mirage. Seen, but not real. Now, for some of you new people, this may be a difficult idea to swallow. So let's back up. It will suffice to simply say that the world is transient, impermanent, but something there is that's an eternal factor that's ever the witness of. But what Shankara is actually saying is something much deeper. Back when we talked about what discrimination was, he said, Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. Brahman alone is real. The phenomenal world is illusory. Any questions? Any thoughts on this?
Is this what they call Brahma? Not Brahman, but Brahma, like the God creator who projects the world. Is that, am I getting
Brahma,
that right?
the creator, very good question, is the same as Ishvara, the Lord.
Okay, but is that what does the projections? Like all our minds working?
Well, we could break it down more subtly.
Okay.
We could say that Brahma, the creator, Ishvara, is the total vasana.
Okay.
Then out of that comes the total mind. The technical term is actually called Hiranyagarbha, which literally means golden egg.
Hiranyagarbha?
Yeah, but it's the sum total of all the thoughts, past, present, and future.
Okay.
And that is what is projecting the world.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? So through your particular body, mind, intellect, Justin, a little portion of the creation is made. And through Deepa, a little portion of the creation comes into appearance. And if tonight you got hit by a bus, a little bit of creation winks out of existence. And when a child is born, or a dog, or a worm, when they come into existence, a little bit of creation is born. It's a hugely complex group effort. And it's, as Swamiji used to say, it's a cosmos, not a chaos, meaning that total mind has an organization. So, for example, for me, light travels at 186,000 miles per second. It doesn't travel at 187,000 miles per second for you. Now, there's some weird warpy things, so that if you were in a spaceship and you were beginning to approach at like 5% the speed of light, there would be time dilation. 3-4 years on the spaceship could be like 5 or 10 years on the Earth. So there's all sorts of weird warping of things that can happen as well. The idea to understand is for our practice, I may think what I know is true. And yoga says you cannot think a real thought. If it's a thought, it's not real. Only the knower is real. So the invitation is to quit believing our stupid mind. Now, the paradox is when we get out of the mind starts to settle down to a large degree. It becomes much less problematic. All right, next one.
Sushupti kale manasi praline naivasti kinchit sakala prasiddhehe ato manah kalpita eva pumsaha samsara etasya navastutosti. In deep sleep, the mind is reduced to its causal state, and nothing perceivable exists, as is proved by the universal experience of all people. Therefore, man's world of change is just a creation of his own mind and has no objective reality.
Yes. So we have another scripture that we study called the Mandukya Upanishad. It's traditionally studied with what we call the Gaudapada Karika. Gaudapada was Shankara's grandfather guru, and it's his particular gloss on it. And in the second chapter, he compares the dream state to the waking state, to the dream state to the waking state, to show that all of our assumptions, why I think the waking state is more real, are faulty assumptions. And here what Shankara is saying, that my world for me disappears every time I go to sleep. And when I wake up, it projects. Go to sleep, goes into its seed form. I wake up, out it comes again. So my knowing of a world, the world that I know, is my mind. So you can have two people who are here in Oakland, and one person can say, oh my God, gloom and doom, terrible world, terrible world, terrible world. We're all going to be destroyed. And another person can say, I'm at peace. It's all God and it's all good. Nothing to worry about. It's all mine. Next verse.
Vayuna niyate megha punasthenaiva niyate manasa kalpyate bandho mokshasthenaiva kalpyate. The wind gathers the clouds together, and the wind itself scatters them. So too the mind is responsible for bondage and also for liberation.
Yes. So listen very carefully. Both bondage and liberation occur to the mind. The self is ever free. It's not yourself that gets liberated. Self is already free. My problem is my mind. when the mind is covered by ignorance, I think I'm my body, or my body plus my personality. And I think the phenomenal world has the power to afflict me or enchant me. And I continually must make efforts, kartavya, obligatory actions. More, better, different, more, better, different, more, better, different. It is the mind that becomes liberated. What does that mean? I see that that's an illusion. I have the direct experience that I am that ground of being, that awareness. And that's never touched by anything. And the world just passes by like a movie in front of me. Any thoughts on this? Next one.
देहादि सर्वविषये परिकल्प्य रागं बध्नाति तेन पुरुषं पशुवद्गुणेन वैरस्यमत्र विषवत्सु विधाय पश्चात् एनं विमोचयति तन्मव एव बन्धात्. The mind causes man's attachment for the body and the sense objects. These attachments bind him like an animal that is bound by ropes. Thereafter, the same mind creates distaste for the very sense objects, for the very same sense objects, as though they were poison, and liberates man from his bondage.
So it's because of my mind in its state of ignorance that I am bound to the objects of the senses. I have attachment for them. That I am bound to ideas of self. I'm good, I'm bad, I'm successful, I'm a failure. But it's that same mind that begins to develop the qualities of a fit student. It develops this intense vairagya, this detachment, the dispassion. Turning the volume level down on the frequency and volume of thought. Taking on this sakshi bhava, this attitude of the witness. What should all go by? And you see the mind starts to mellow out. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
तस्मात् मनः कारणमस्य जन्तोः बन्धस्य मोक्षस्य च वा विधाने बन्धस्य हेतुः मलिनं रजोगुणैः मोक्षस्य शुद्धं विजस्तमस्कम्. Therefore, the mind is the cause for both liberation as well as bondage. When it is blemished with the effects of rajas, it causes bondage. When it is free from the rajas and tamas qualities, it paves the way to liberation.
Yes. So we've talked about these three gunas, these qualities of tamas, rajas, and sattva. So when the mind is in the rajasic state, I want, I want, I want, I want. It's painful. And the more I want, the more it hurts. And if I deal with that feeling restless, irritable, and discontent by fixing the mind, by soothing the mind, by numbing the mind, move the mind from rajas into tamas. I eat at it, I sex at it, I drink at it, I smoke dope at it, I Netflix at it, I do something to get away from this discontent. Problem is, it's only temporary and creates a deeper and deeper addictive relationship with the world. My suffering gets more and more intense. But if, on the other hand, I start to practice yoga, which is what we've been learning, my Viveka, my discrimination between the real and the unreal, see what's really going on, take on this practice of intense renunciation. Don't have to get rid of any objects, because the objects are not problematic. It's my attachment. It's my clinging. The commitment to let go of any idea of self. Give up desires to be important, but also give up ideas that I'm a worthless person. I'm not a person. I'm the witnessing awareness. Drop it all. Drop it all. It is the mind that undergoes this. This brings it into the state of sattva, of clarity, purity. In the sattvic mind, my self-nature is clearly evident. The mind is spontaneously joyful and peaceful. I see the world and it's beautiful, because it's all God. It's all good. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Viveka Vairagya Gunatireka Chuddhatvam Mano Vimuktयै Bhavatyato Buddhimato Mumukshuhu Tabhyam Dridabhyam Bhavita Pyamagre. The mind has been made pure due to a predominance of discrimination and dispassion. It turns towards liberation. These two must be strengthened by one who's an intelligent seeker of liberation.
So Shankara is simply reaffirming what I said in my commentary on the last verse. How can I achieve this mind, this Vishuddha mind, this extremely pure mind? Viveka, discrimination. And what this does is it empowers our vairagya. Let me see if I can give a worldly example. Well, okay. Let's say someone has a problem with drinking. And they have a resentment, or something happens and they really, really want to drink. What do? Viveka, discriminate. Now let me think the drink through. What's going to happen if I have one drink? Well, you never had one drink, Jim. You always got shit-faced. What happens when that happens? Well, you make a total ass of yourself. Okay. My mind is telling me I want the drink, but I don't really want the drink. Let it go. Let it go. Turn my mind into servants. So the discrimination feeds the detachment, the dispassion. You want to lose weight. You see a commercial. Next thing you know, you want Ben and Jerry's ice cream. You discriminate. No. Minute on the lips and eternity on the hips. I'm not going to do it. Have an apple. Discrimination allows us to be dispassionate. How do we apply it to our yoga? Indiscriminate revelry with the objects of the senses, meaning I am the doer. That object is where all the joy is. I'm going to go do it. And then after the fact, chintya, after the fact, rumination. Oh, that was so great. That was so great. That was so wonderful. I relive the pleasure. It leaves a vasana and makes me want to repeat the action. Swamiji, or not Swamiji, Shankara used to say, don't embrace a rotting corpse thinking it's a beautiful bride. No. Bring the mind home. Shama, Dhamma, Varati. Keep it intensely introverted. Don't let it slobber all over the objects. It's intense introversion. We don't even think about doing that unless we've had some Viveka and Vairagya. Any thoughts on this? Again, let me stress, the world isn't bad. The world is essentially neutral. The word we use is shunyata. It's actually void. All the joy-giving and misery-producing qualities I have projected. Pull that out of the world. Next verse.
Mano nama mahavyagro Vishayaranyabhumishu Charatyatra nagachantu Sadhavo ye mumukshavaha. A huge tiger called mind prowls in the thick jungles of sense pleasures. Let not those virtuous people who have a deep aspiration for liberation ever wander therein.
Yes. So the person who wants freedom commits herself to an inside vow of sannyas. Sannyas means renunciation. We find echoes of this in the Western traditions of poverty. It's not about living in penury. It's not about not having stuff. It's not about living on the dole, having other people take care of you. It's a commitment to a simple life. It's a commitment to an inside vow of non-ownership. What I have is mine to use, none of it do I really own. It's all on loan from the infinite. With the absolute ability to get up and walk away from any of it. Complete detachment from the outcome of events. Complete acceptance of whatever the Lord brings. Keeping the mind intensely introverted. When triggers and reactions come up, you notice them, you watch them. Like I always say, just don't do something, stand there. Let yourself shake, rattle, and roll, and it will pass. It will pass. Sometimes we may need to give up something if it really has us in a grip. You'll know, you'll intuitively know if you need to avoid a particular situation for some time or avoid a particular action. So you know within that there's no longer a sense of need. It's funny, a lot of people are using the phrase, well, I'm not getting my needs met. Our needs are few: food, clothing, and shelter. All the rest is desire. Well, that doesn't mean I'm not going to have any fun, Jim. But do you want a bigger playground? Don't settle for something so little. For those of us from a Christian background, this is what Jesus meant when he would say, I am in the world, but not of it. My kingdom is not of this world. And then he'd turn around and say, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. It's right here. You don't have to wait till you die. What's the price tag? There's a story in the Christian scripture. Young man comes to Jesus and said, Master, what's the greatest commandment? And Jesus says, how do you read the law? And he says, you should love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength, and you should love your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus says, rightly have you read the law. sell all that you own and give it to the poor, and come and follow me. The young man went away with a heavy heart because he was a young man of great wealth. Missed his chance because he was attached. Very close, but attached. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Manah prasute Vishayana Thulatmana Sukshmataya Cha Bhoktuhu Sharira Varnashrama Chati Bheda Gunakriya Hetu Phalani Nityam. The mind continuously delivers for the experiencer. 1. All sense objects, gross or subtle, without exception. 2. Distinctions based upon body, caste, order of life, and creed, as well as 3. The difference of qualities, actions, motives, and results.
So, this is what the mind delivers to us. First of all objective phenomena, gross and subtle. For example, I always use this as a clear example. Is it my ears that hear, or is it my mind? So one of my habits is at 11 o'clock, I turn on channel 5 with every intention of hearing Colbert, and I lie down on the couch to watch the local news. And I usually fall asleep somewhere between 11 and 11:30. And then I'll awaken at 12:30 or 1. And if I've had a dream when that happens, in the dream I may be on a sailboat and I'm hearing the wind in the sails, etc. But the sound of Stephen Colbert is what's going into my ear, vibrating my eardrum, making those little bones vibrate, the cochlea stuff. But that's not what my mind is delivering to me. All sense perception, gross and subtle, meaning not only the external world, but my feelings, my thoughts, images, memories, all of it is delivered to me by the mind. Number 1. Number 2, was it the qualities of things? I forgot. Read number 2 again for me, Ganesh.
Distinctions based on caste, qualities, order of life,
Yes.
etc.
So what things are to distinguish them? I see that person, what's the story behind them? They are a good person, they're a bad person, they're African American, they're European, they're Hispanic, Latinx, all those distinctions. Also, that's a noble person, that's a scoundrel, that's a woman, that's a man, gay, straight, all these distinctions. It is the mind that creates them. And what was the third one?
Differences in qualities.
Oh, yeah. So whether or not things are good or bad, I like it or I don't like it, That's a beautiful flower. That's an ugly horse. The judgments that I put on things, all of that is delivered by the mind. That's my world. One of the things I find fascinating. So you'll be in a group of people and someone may say to you, oh, I can't figure out why you can stand to be around so and so and so and so. They just drive me up a wall. And you'll say, oh, they're a little bit unusual, but that doesn't bother me. And then antithetically, you may say, oh God, do we have to have tea or lunch with so and so? They just drive me nuts. And your friend says, really? What is it about them? It's my mind. And then, of course, what does my mind do? I want to prove that my opinion about the objective reality is true. So I go looking for agreement. Oh, my boss, he is so awful. I'm going to find everybody in the company who also thinks he's awful. That will prove to me I was right. He's awful. It's all just mine. Donald Trump is a master of knowing this. Because if he wants to create an idea in the world, he keeps repeating it and he keeps putting it out into all sorts of media. And he says it over and over and over again until people start to believe it. He's a master at being able to create reality bubbles for people. Because at some intuitive level, he understands this about the mind. He's very, very good at it. Very, very good at it. You say it often enough, and if you say it loud enough, people start to believe it because it's the mind that creates these kinds of realities. Next verse.
Asanga chidrupamamum vimohya dehendriya pranagunaihi nibandhya aham mameti pramayatyajastram manah svakrityeshu phalopabhuktishu. Unattached pure intelligence is the essence of the jiva, but the mind beguiles it and binds it by ties of body, sense organs, and pranas. It causes this jiva to wander with the idea of I and mine in the varied experiences of results gathered by itself.
So, the real nature of my identity is unattached, asangaha. I am never touched by the phenomenal world, but it is the ignorance of the mind that beguiles me and makes me think I am my body. I am my body plus the prana. I am good, I am bad, I'm successful, I'm a failure. I'm important, I'm not important. I'm right, I'm wrong. I'm handsome, I'm ugly, I'm old, I'm young. I am fill in the blank. And that's what gives us the illusion of this individuality. This individuality with qualities and characteristics. It constantly feels that it needs to be protected and reinforced and defended. The struggle of ego. The struggle of ego. That's the problem. The truth is, Sangoham, Sangoham, Sangoham Puna Puna, Sachidanandarupaham, Aham Mebaham Avyaya, unattached, unattached, unattached to my again and again. Existence, consciousness, bliss is my nature. I am that I am, immutable. All right, we'll end here. What verse are we on?
It's 179.
179. And we'll do 180 next week or 179 next week.
Sorry, we ended on 178. We'll do 179 next week.
All right, 179 next week. Okay, we have 10 minutes or so for questions or comments. How'd you do with this, Steve? Did he stick around?
He's here, but I think he's on mute.
Steve, unmute yourself.
All right. Yeah,
How'd you do?
I did great. Everything I heard rings true. Nothing really new.
All right.
What I mean, I'm not saying that I'm a scholar of this teaching, but it rings true to me from what I have gleaned through reading other spiritual things. But my quest right now is in finding a technique to get beyond the mind. Like the Buddhists talk about mind with a big M and a little m, and the witness is the mind with the big M, and all the bullshit that goes through our little minds is the little m. And when I meditate, there are times when I find glimpses of that big M, and it's blissful, but it's fleeting. And
All right.
so I'm in search for a technique that will lead me to transcendence. But
I will give you the technique.
okay.
Discrimination and dispassion. It means we have to give up the world and give up all ideas of self. And there's no other way. There's no mechanical technique. What
Yeah,
keeps-
I understand that, but enlightenment, if you want to call it that, comes in a moment, and
That
you
is
can
correct.
study. You can study for
I'm
the
not
rest
saying
of
study.
your life.
I'm
And-
not saying study. I'm saying practice. What
Okay.
holds the ignorance of the mind in place is this gripping, this attachment. And there's no other way to do it than as you move through the world, you have to give up the world and
Yes.
give up. There's no other way.
I understand that, but when you give up the world, you're giving it up with the small m mind. And
Remember what Shankara said, both bondage and liberation occur to the mind. What you want to do is disempower that little mind. When the mind itself quits believing in itself, it commits psychic suicide. But you, big mind,
right,
are always there.
true.
So it's not about gripping the mind into quiescence in moments in meditation. In your Buddhist readings, have you read it all about the choice of the sixth Zen patriarch or Chan patriarch?
No.
Google that and read the story.
The six
The
patriarch?
sixth Zen patriarch, the fifth Zen patriarch, and how the sixth one was chosen. It's a fascinating story because it's not about mirror wiping. It's not about trying to have a technique to make the mind all of a sudden stop. It really has to do with seeing the unreality of the mind itself. These are great questions.
Thank you.
And you're right, enlightenment is sudden. You either see it or you don't. There is a process in bringing the mind to a place where it's purified enough that that insight is easy. Another Buddhist saying, enlightenment happens by accident, Zen makes you accident prone. That's what we're doing with this. But eventually, the technique that we're going to use is intense inquiry into your self-nature. Koham, who am I? What's my essential nature? And this radical willingness to cast off any idea of self and any attachment to the world. I hope that's useful.
Yes, thank you.
Good questions. Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a question.
Who's that?
My name is Eros. This is my first time that I've attended your satsang.
How do you spell arrows?
Eros, like the Greek
I
god of love.
love it. What a great name. Welcome, Arrows.
Well, thank you very much. I once had a satsang teacher insult me because I had the audacity to name myself Eros. So
Well,
I
I
stopped
just
seeing
wanted to
him.
make sure that it wasn't ARROWS.
Okay. Why? Is that someone else?
No, but that would be Arrows.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, actually I have a friend named Arrow, spelled that way.
Okay, well, what's your question, Arrows?
So I've had like a long history of studying this stuff for a couple of decades, mostly following like Ramana and Nisargadatta. But I seem to feel really stuck in that, although I've had a lot of great deep spiritual experiences, it seems my happiness in my life is still controlled by my circumstances, and I haven't been able to free myself of that. And I was wondering if you have any suggestions.
Same thing I was saying to Steve. There's the self-inquiry we do in our meditation seat. But the real yoga, the nasty, dirty, sweaty kind of yoga that we have to do is our willing to give up my investment in the world. You've got to make your peace of mind your most prized possession. It's the ultimate FU to the world. And whatever's going on out there, it's never important enough for you to lose your serenity. And so it's situation by situation by situation. Now, guru is a principle. The physical guru is a temporary psychological device, but the other place the guru shows up is in my worldly circumstances. So if you look, for example, to an event that's happened recently where you got agitated, can you bring that to mind?
Yes.
Tell me that's the first time you've had that feeling.
No.
Uh-huh. So it's gonna keep coming back, Eros, until you let the fuck go. It's your guru. Give it up. And it's person by person, situation by situation, thing by thing, idea of self by idea of self. And it's done in the world. And it's not about Kundalini. And it's not about fettuccine. It's about this manual labor of giving up the world. And nothing needs to change in the outer. It's inside. And both Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta Maharaj are going to say the same thing.
Thank
Is that
you.
useful?
Yes, thank you.
And that's the piece most of us just don't want to have to deal with. You can't, Shankara will use the image of the snake and the rope. I'm sure you've come across that in your reading.
Yes.
Okay, as long as you keep smooching that snake, you're never going to come to the rope.
Okay.
Welcome, come back.
Thank
right.
you. I will.
Anybody else? Deepa Ji, would you please put the link to Viveka Chudamani on Amazon back up in the chat if it's not still there?
Sure, happy to do it.
So Steve and Eros, anybody else that's new, I highly recommend that you get the book because we're not going to go back and review it. And this is a linear text. So what we're covering now is based on all the stuff that we've covered for months and months and months. But Swamiji's commentary is very thorough. Is it up?
Yes.
Okay, great. And you can leave that up perhaps, and now we'll have our meditation.
Okay.
So for the new people, please mute so your scratching and stuff doesn't disturb us. And we'll have about 17 minutes of silence. Om Namah Shivaya.